Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. If you're new around here, my name's Jessica, and on this channel we like to talk all about how to make you become a better home chef. So we talk about a variety of different things in the food and drink world, and today we are focusing on your ultimate guide to how to make cold brew espresso coffee. So this video is going to talk through all the details and of course some of the science behind how to brew cold brew at home, so that way you don't have to spend all of your hard-earned money on drinks at Starbucks, as well as different ways to make simple syrups and sweeteners if you like those in your coffee, and finally some ways to make cold foam with and without a frother. So I hope that you'll stick around and enjoy this video. This is a bit of a longer video, so feel free to use the timestamp linked in the description below if you want to jump around this video. As always, make sure to hit that subscribe button and stick around. I have tons more videos coming up for the holiday season and everything in between. If there's anything that you specifically want me to make a video on, feel free to throw that in the comments below. So first up, we need to talk about all the details behind brewing cold brew at home. There's definitely a reason that people love cold brew maybe a little bit more than hot coffee. As somebody who hasn't been into coffee until recently, I've actually really discovered how much I love cold brew, and that's due to how it's actually brewed. So cold brew, because you're steeping it for long times at cold temperatures, it has a more sweet and less bitter taste than your traditional cup of hot coffee. Now, obviously, I've done tons of research into this subject, and I want to talk to you a little bit more about the science that goes into cold brewing, because there are some interesting factors that will determine how the final product of your coffee tastes. So let's jump into those, and then I'll show you how to make cold brew at home. The first thing that you need to think of when it comes to cold brew coffee is the type of roast that you're gonna use. For this recipe, I'm showing you an espresso cold brew, so we're using a dark roast. But there are many types of roasts out there. So most common are light roast, medium, and dark roast. Most experts agree that light roast cold brew tends to fall flat, so I would avoid that. However, feel free to experiment with the different types of roasts and see what you best enjoy. The next thing to pay attention to is your grind size. So when you go to buy coffee beans, you can grind it anywhere from finely ground to coarsely ground, and pretty much anywhere in between. So when we're talking about cold brew coffee, it's recommended that you stick with coarsely ground beans. And that's because with finely ground beans, you risk over-extraction. If you're new to coffee, over-extraction is when there are too many soluble flavors that are removed from the coffee, resulting in an unpleasant, usually bitter taste. So you're definitely welcome to play around with this. In a pinch, I found that finely ground can work. It just is going to be more bitter than if you use a coarsely ground coffee bean. Next up, we need to talk about the temperature of the water. So most people who make cold brew either brew it in the refrigerator, so that's obviously maintaining a temperature of around 41 degrees Fahrenheit, versus some other people prefer to brew at room temperature on like their kitchen counter, let's say. Both of these options are going to result in a slightly different taste. I've watched many videos to try to see which one's better, and it really just comes down to personal preference and what you prefer. One thing to note is that if you do choose to brew your coffee in the refrigerator, it is going to take a few hours longer than if you brew it on your counter. And last but not least, the length of your brew is also going to determine the final taste of your coffee. Usually for cold brew, it's recommended to brew it about 12 to 18 hours. And this is what I use in my recipe, and just note that we are brewing it in the refrigerator. You can definitely test out the coffee once you hit that 12-hour mark to determine if you prefer it closer to 12 hours or closer to 18 hours. The one thing to note is that you don't want to brew your coffee too long or it can become bitter. Alright, so now that you know a little bit about the science behind the cold brew and why I chose to do the things I chose to do in this recipe, let's just jump on in and start making our cold brew espresso. So first up, you're going to need a dark roasted, coarsely ground espresso bean. If you can't find espresso beans in the grocery store, just try to find something that's dark roasted. That will work as well. Next, you'll also need some cool water, and some experts say that filtered water is better, but I've had great luck with tap water. Just make sure that it's cool when it comes out of your sink and you'll be good to go. You also won't want to forget to grab a few tools. So for this, you'll need a 64-ounce glass jar. I found that mason jars work perfectly, but you can use anything that you have on hand at home. You'll want two of them, one to brew the coffee and one to store the final product in. You'll also need a coffee strainer as well as a mesh strainer, obviously to help strain the grounds out of the coffee so we get a perfectly smooth final cold brew. So all you'll need to do to get this process started is add 1 cup of coarsely ground dark roasted espresso beans to your mason jar. Then add 3 cups of cool water on top of it, and you'll want to stir it together just to make sure all of the beans are fully coated and have water covering them. From here, screw on the lid of the glass jar, and then you're going to put it in your fridge to steep for 12 to 18 hours. If you're like me, you might forget what time you put the cold brew into the refrigerator, so you can always mark it with some tape what time you need to take it out. I oftentimes like to mark 12 hours as well as 18 hours so I can kind of taste in between to get the perfect cold brew to my taste. Now that your time is up and it's brewed for either overnight or the full 18 hours, you'll want to grab your mesh strainer and line it with a coffee filter. From here, pour about half of the cold brew coffee into the coffee filter and allow it to slowly drip through the coffee filter. This process may take a while. It doesn't go super quickly, so plan on at least 15 to 20 minutes to allow all of the coffee in your mason jar to fully strain. And then once you're left with just the coffee grounds, go ahead and dump those in your trash can. You definitely don't want to put them down your garbage disposal. That is a no-no. And then from here, you can place your final cold brew coffee into your other mason jar. Now I will warn you that this is a cold brew espresso concentrate, so it is a little more flavorful and has a little bit more caffeine than if you were to dilute it down. So with this, you can actually make any of your coffee drinks of your choice and dilute it down with ice, water, milk, cream, whatever you would prefer, since it is a concentrate. This cold brew should last about 7 to 10 days in your refrigerator, so place it in there and pull it out in the morning or when you need a caffeine boost in the afternoon, and you can make your favorite drink. Alright, so if you're like me, you may not be a coffee purist yet, and you might like some simple syrup or sweetener to help give your coffee just a little less bitter taste. So in this chapter of the video, I wanted to go through how to make a simple syrup. I know so often when we all go to Starbucks or Dunkin' Donuts, they have all of these different flavors of coffee and you think like, wow, this is so hard to make these sweeteners. But really, simple syrup is so easy to make at home, and I wish more people knew about it because it takes about 5 minutes of your time and only a few ingredients, so why not save money and make any flavor combination that you want? All you need is a small saucepan and 2 ingredients. You're gonna use 1 part sugar to 1 part water. It's as simple as that. I usually like to do a cup of granulated sugar along with 1 cup of water because it makes me enough simple syrup to last a couple weeks. You'll put both the sugar and the water into the saucepan and let it cook over medium heat for about 1.5 minutes to 2 minutes, just until the sugar has fully dissolved. You also have the option to add in some flavor extracts. So if you want vanilla, you can add in vanilla extract. You can also add in a cinnamon stick or even an orange peel. All of these are just going to be flavor enhancers that will help change up the flavor of the simple syrup and make it something a little bit different. If you do decide to use a flavor enhancer, you can also allow it to steep until the whole sugar and water mixture has cooled completely and you're able to transfer it to a glass jar. This just allows the flavor a little bit extra time to sit with the sugar and water and absorb that flavor. Now, if you're making simple syrup at home, it should keep for about a month in your refrigerator. It lasts a long time, which is why I usually like to make a large batch. The fun part comes in because you can actually use any type of sugar you want. I've made some simple syrups using brown sugar. I also have one, it's a copycat version of the Starbucks brown sugar syrup, and it uses a combination of brown sugar along with maple syrup. So there's tons of different options to get creative and make simple syrups that are flavored really however you want them. In the long run, this is going to be so much more of an inexpensive option for you. So I hope that you'll give it a try at least once and see if you can make a simple syrup that you love. We are moving right along to cold foam. And this is something that if you've ever had Starbucks, I feel like is the thing that makes it very decadent and rich and exciting to drink. I do love the cold brew coffee, but I feel like it's not the same without the cold foam on top. So I want to show you some options of making cold foam at home because again, just like the simple syrup, it's not as hard as you may think. So let's start out by chatting a little bit about what is cold foam. If you've ever had cold brew in your Starbucks drink, it's usually made with non-fat milk and then blended to get those bubbles and nice foamy texture that we all love. You can definitely make a non-fat version at home if that's what you like, but I also experimented and tried making cold foam with 2% milk and heavy cream. And these were both great options, especially if you love the flavor that the additional fat adds. Really all you need to do to make this cold foam is use a dairy product of your choice, a little bit of simple sugar, and then mix it up with a frother. Now if you don't have a frother, I do want to give you a few extra ways that you can make cold foam at home. So the recipe that I use for all of my cold foam is 3.5 ounces of dairy product. You can either use all non-fat milk, all heavy cream, or my favorite, which was half 2% milk and half heavy cream. And then we're also gonna add about half an ounce of simple syrup. This not only sweetens up the cold foam, but it helps give a little bit more structure to the cold foam. First up, we're gonna try making cold foam with a mason jar. For the mason jar, I found that the best texture and best tasting cold foam, in my opinion, was using half 2% milk and half heavy cream. All you have to do with the mason jar is shake it up for about 45 seconds. You will require a little bit of arm work, but trust me, it's worth the effort, and then you can just pour it over your cold brew. You can also make cold brew just using a simple whisk. Make sure that you have a glass or a metal bowl. Don't use your ceramic bowls because the whisk may scratch them up. And then once again, choose your favorite dairy product and simple syrup of choice. You can also use flavored simple syrup. It'll just add a little flavor to the cold foam, so don't be afraid to do that. And then you'll need to whisk for about a full 45 seconds. I do recommend that you set a timer so you don't cut this time short. You want a thick and creamy cold foam, and it does require the full 45 seconds to do this. As for the whisk method, I did actually like only using heavy cream. I felt that it got a really thick and nice texture, whereas the ones that had milk in it fell a little bit flat. This is especially true for the non-fat milk. It just turned out really bubbly and not really thick like you would think of with a traditional cold foam. Best to stick with either the 2% milk and heavy cream or just heavy cream by itself on this method. And finally, if you don't have a frother, it's also an option to make your cold foam in a blender. This is actually the way that most of the Starbucks cold foams are made, so it's a great option. All you'll need to do is put your dairy product, simple syrup, in the blender, blend on high for about 45 seconds. With this method, I preferred the non-fat milk, which is no surprise since that's exactly what Starbucks does to make their cold foam. So give this a try and see which piece of equipment as well as dairy product combinations you best like for your cold foam. And as always, I will leave a link in the description below with my whole experiment where I tried all these types of dairy products as well as all the different pieces of equipment to see which cold foam was my favorite. And don't worry, I listed my favorites in the blog post as well. And finally, for any Starbucks lovers out there who love the sweet cream, I want to show you how to make this recipe. I searched all over barista TikTok to try to find the exact ratios that Starbucks uses. And it's not as hard to make as you would think. So all you need for sweet cream is 3 parts of heavy cream, 2 parts 2% milk, and 1 part of simple syrup. For the sweet cream by itself, all you have to do is mix those ingredients up and pour it over your cold brew. However, if you're wanting to make the sweet cream cold foam, you'll have to use any of the methods that we just discussed in order to make that foamy, creamy top that we all love. I also have a video for this that I'll link above if you want to watch the whole process by itself, but this is also a great coffee topping option if you enjoy it. Well, I hope that this coffee guide helped you, and now that you're able to create your own coffee at home rather than having to go to Starbucks and waste all your money on coffee. Of course, it's a super nice treat to be able to have somebody else make you coffee, but just for everyday purposes, it's also nice to be able to save some money and make it at home, especially if you're in a rush and need to get out the door. You can have your cold brew already stocked, your simple syrup already made, and it really only takes about a minute to whip up some really fantastic cold foam. Don't forget to check the description below for other videos in this coffee series, as well as all the recipes that we talked about today will be linked there. I hope that you'll consider subscribing to stick around and learn more about fun ways that you can get in the kitchen. And until the next video, I'll see you then.